I hadn't set foot on that site in over 3 years. The second my boots hit the concrete of the Grand Meridian Tower construction floor, I felt every eye shift toward me. Some turned away quickly, others didn't bother. A few snickered. I heard one whisper, "Is that her? The one who blew the wind test?" My name is Dr. Helena Voss. I'm 39. I used to be the lead architect behind the most ambitious vertical sustainability project in the country, the Grand Meridian Tower. Used to be, until the day it all blew up in my face. I kept walking. The familiar hum of machinery, the clank of metal scaffolding, the smell of raw concrete, all of it came flooding back. But the worst thing was seeing my name etched in faded chalk on the old project board. H. Voss, Rev. 3.2 blueprint, scratched out in red. Replaced. A few engineers turned to watch me pass. One, a younger guy I didn't recognize, laughed under his breath and said, "Guess they'll let anyone back on site now." I ignored it. I had bigger things to deal with. At the edge of the floor, near the steel core where elevator shafts met crossbeams, stood a man I knew too well, Marcus Voss, my father, chief director of the Grand Meridian Project, still barking orders like he was commanding a battleship. He saw me. His face didn't twitch, didn't change, just narrowed his eyes, raised an arm, and called out, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Who authorized her entry?" The whole floor went quiet. I opened my mouth, not to explain. I wasn't there to ask for permission. But before I could say a word, a calm, assertive voice spoke behind me. "She is the original designer," said Evelyn Stroud. I turned to see her, the city's development commissioner, in a slate gray blazer and hard hat that looked cleaner than it should have been. She walked with the kind of composure that dared people to argue. No one did. Marcus went pale. His mouth opened, then shut. "She's here as a consultant," Evelyn continued, her voice cool. "Effective immediately." Marcus stepped forward. "That project failed, Evelyn. She failed." "No," Evelyn said. "She was failed." And that was it. I nodded once at Evelyn in thanks, then stepped toward the schematic board near the center scaffold. It was still pinned with the current load charts and engineering models, warped under the plastic covering from humidity and time. They hadn't fixed anything. They'd just buried it under revisions. The men who used to call me the future of architecture were now whispering to each other like I was a ghost, some smirking. One shook his head, but I wasn't there to change their minds. I was there to fix the building and prove who really broke it. Let them laugh. I wasn't leaving until the truth stood taller than they ever let me. I was alone in the level 19 drafting room when I finally got my hands on the latest blueprints. They weren't mine, not really. The page bore my name in the corner, Voss, H. But the lines didn't match my hand. Someone had altered them. I traced my finger across a cluster of load-bearing walls that were never meant to be there. The wind-bracing system had been shifted 3 meters off its resonance corridor. The fireproofing along the east-facing core had been halved. I stared at the page for a long time. No wonder the structure was reacting badly in simulation tests. My system, the cascade dampener, it wasn't even there anymore, just replaced with a cheaper static frame, rigid and fragile, a contradiction in steel. Footsteps echoed behind me. "Surprised you're still here," said a voice. I didn't need to turn to know it was Grant Mallory, lead structural engineer and Marcus's hand-picked lapdog. "Reviewing the changes," I said, keeping my eyes on the page. He scoffed. "Still calling it your design? That ship sailed 3 years ago." I turned to look at him. Mid-40s, always a little too polished. Shirt tucked in like he was going to a meeting instead of a construction floor. He was holding a coffee he didn't offer to share. "Your version passed simulations?" I asked. Grant took a long sip. "They're within range." "Range of collapse," he smirked. "You'd know about that." I stepped closer, laid the blueprint flat, and pointed to the bracing schedule. "This offset right here. It throws off the entire wind load balance above the 45th floor. Your deflection readings drop into red under lateral pressure. That's not sustainable. That's negligence." He didn't flinch. "It passed inspection." I stared at him. "Because you used my name to pass it, and then gutted the design after I was gone." He tapped the edge of the page. "Look, I don't know what story you're telling yourself, but your version failed the stress cascade. Everyone remembers that." "No," I said. "It was changed before the test." He shrugged. "You can believe whatever helps you sleep." I straightened the blueprint, careful, steady. "I'd like access to the original design file." Grant glanced behind me. A pause. Then he looked toward the inner office, where Marcus stood behind glass, arms crossed, watching like a man ready to pounce. Grant shook his head. Access denied. I nodded once. Then I'll rebuild it from memory. He raised an eyebrow. You can't. I can, I said flatly, folding the blueprint. And I will. Grant laughed, but it was nervous now. You really think this'll change anything? I don't think, I said, already walking away. I know. The lights flickered when I slipped into the municipal archives building just past midnight. My badge from the university still granted access, a leftover courtesy from an old sustainability audit I once helped lead. It was enough to get me past the security panel. The structural records wing smelled like paper and old wiring. A slow hum buzzed from the backup servers along the far wall. Most of the tower's early-stage data had been digitized, but I knew the system. Some of the files wouldn't be on the open index. I found the console and typed in my access code. Grand Meridian Project Phase 1 logs. The files loaded slowly, row after row of project reports, internal communications, simulation video logs, and safety inspection forms. I narrowed the filter by date, 6 months leading up to the day I was removed. There it was. A fire suppression system report dated 1 week before the failed wind test. Status: passed. But the internal notes didn't line up. I expanded the embedded comments. Pressure failed at node 4, suppression density inadequate, technician override requested. What the hell? I checked the time log. The document was signed off 4 hours after the test supposedly took place. That didn't make sense. Then I opened the digital signature. Marcus Voss, Chief Director. Authorization override. Approve final, minor variance acceptable. I felt the breath leave my chest. It wasn't just carelessness, it was fraud. The system had failed, and instead of flagging it, Marcus had signed it off like it passed. I opened 2 more files. One from the Cascade Dampening Review, the system I had designed to stabilize the structure against wind resonance. The installation plan had been deferred. Notes read, too complex to implement under budget constraints, alt method used per directive MV, alt method, a dead weight frame, no flexibility, no adaptability, no resistance to harmonic vibration. My system wasn't just modified, it had been stripped out entirely. I clicked through the logs, digging deeper, faster now. Over a dozen reports had been backdated. Safety flags were ignored. 3 technicians had left cryptic sign-off notes. Executive directive received, proceed despite recommendations. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. I hadn't failed that test. Marcus had already rewritten the design behind my back. Then he used the failure to bury me. He let me take the fall. I sat back, the air in the server room suddenly cold. My hands trembled as I inserted a backup drive and started copying the files. Every report, every override, every edit. It wasn't about salvaging a design anymore. It was about proving that what happened wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Marcus didn't just sacrifice the integrity of a building. He sacrificed his daughter. The screen flashed. Transfer complete. I pulled the drive, slipped it into my coat, and left without looking back. This time, I had proof. I stood at the center of the simulation floor as the model loaded onto the screen. Above me, the wind tunnel's ceiling-mounted turbines whirred to life, their low hum growing into a mechanical growl. The test engineers moved with quiet efficiency, calibrating sensors, setting thresholds, triple-checking the fail-safes. Evelyn Stroud sat behind the glass wall in the observation booth, arms folded, her expression unreadable. Beside her was Grant Mallory, doing his best to look relaxed, even as he tapped his pen against the clipboard like a drumbeat. "This is a waste of time," he said, loud enough for me to hear. "Her model's already been replaced by real-world tested design." I didn't answer. I stepped forward and keyed in the resonance input values. Simulation A, baseline wind speed, 40 miles per hour, initiate. The tower model, a high-fidelity digital rendering of my restored design, shimmered onto the 3D projection wall. Sensors blinked green across the board. Then the wind hit. At first, everything held. The bracing flexed the way it was designed to. The internal energy dampeners redistributed the vibration across the lateral core zones, exactly as I'd calculated. But then, a high-pitched beep echoed across the floor. Alert, stress spike, resonance detected. Grant leaned forward with a smug grin. There it is. I didn't blink. I adjusted the variable timing on the phase delay of the Cascade system. The old system had staggered timing, milliseconds apart, but this had to match the original sequencing I'd built from memory. I re-entered the calculations manually. The alert disappeared. Silence. Then a second wave of simulated wind hit. Stronger this time, over 60 miles per hour. The building flexed again. No alarms. Evelyn leaned in. Are we approaching failure point? 84 miles per hour, said the engineer running the board. Coming up in 3, 2, 1. The projection flickered, swayed. No failure, no red lights, no collapse, just a clean, sustained balance between stress and flow. My structure held. The observation booth was silent. Grant lowered his pen, his jaw clenched. I turned slowly toward the booth. I want a second round of testing, I said. Same wind profile, but this time use the current site version, the one you all signed off on. Evelyn gave a slight nod. Approved. 15 minutes later, the simulation restarted with their altered design, the one that had cut my system for cost. At 40 miles per hour, the bracing flexed erratically. At 65, the stress cascade failed to distribute. The warning lights went off. At 74 miles per hour, the structure began to buckle. By 80, it collapsed. Evelyn looked from the screen to Grant. So this is what passed inspection? Grant opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't say anything either. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke for me. And this time they were finally listening. The call came just after midnight. I almost didn't answer. My eyes were heavy, my desk scattered with printouts from the simulation, validation I'd waited 3 years to see. But something in the number made me pause. Unknown? Out-of-state area code. I let it ring twice more, then picked up. Helena, said the voice. Hoarse, familiar. I sat up straighter. Who is this? It's Adrian Cole. My breath caught. Adrian had been a structural analyst on the original Meridian team. Brilliant, meticulous. He vanished after the failure. No notice, no explanation. Just left. I'd always wondered why. You disappeared, I said quietly. I had to, he said. But I've been following the project, your return, the test results. There was a pause. I heard traffic in the background, maybe a highway. I saw what they did to your design, he said. I should have come forward sooner. I swallowed. What exactly did you see, Adrian? He exhaled hard. They used your security credentials after you were removed. Someone backdated approvals using your ID. It was how they pushed the post-failure design through the database. My throat tightened. They forged my signature? No, he said. They didn't have to. Marcus had override clearance. He used your access logins. He had IT reinstate your profile briefly. Claimed it was a system error. Just long enough to make it look like you approved the revisions. I stared at the floor, stunned. That explained everything. Why I couldn't access files. Why the final changes had been tagged under my name even though I'd been locked out. I have proof, Adrian added. Encrypted logs, metadata. I archived them before I left. I've been waiting. For what? For someone to care, he said. And to not be alone in this. My voice was barely above a whisper. Can you send it? I already did, he said. Check your email. It's all there. Security entries, timestamp mismatches, deleted wind resonance failure reports, all traced to Marcus. I closed my eyes for a moment. The rage didn't come. Not yet. Just a quiet, steady burn under my ribs. A confirmation of what I already knew. I hadn't just been written out. I'd been erased. I'm sorry, Adrian said. You didn't deserve what happened. No, I said, but he's going to. I ended the call and opened my laptop. The drive downloaded in seconds. There it was, Marcus's signature on a falsified deletion of wind tunnel failure logs. He hadn't just altered my design, he'd framed me to claim the tower as his legacy. But now I had the truth, and he was going to face it. I found him alone in the upper office, the one with the skyline view. The walls were still lined with blueprint frames from the early days of the Meridian project. My original sketches hung behind his desk, still proudly displayed, even after he'd signed off on my downfall. Marcus Voss didn't look surprised to see me. Helena, he said flatly, not even rising from his chair. You've certainly made a lot of noise this week. I closed the door behind me, slow and deliberate. You lied. He didn't blink. I've made decisions. That's different. I stepped forward and placed the flash drive on his desk, right beside the engraved nameplate he'd had since I was a child. That contains every digital log you authorized under my credentials. You backdated approvals, you deleted failure reports. You used me as your shield. He glanced at the drive but didn't touch it. His fingers stayed laced under his chin. I did what I had to, he said. To protect the building? I asked. He shook his head slowly. To protect the project. No, I snapped. You didn't protect the project. You protected yourself. His jaw tightened. You were aiming too high, Helena. Your design? It was too complex, too risky for the timeline the city gave us. I tried to tell you. You didn't tell me, I said, my voice rising. You cut me out. You let them think I was the failure. You let me walk away with the blame so you could fix things quietly and keep your title clean. He stood now, finally, slow and stiff like the weight of it all was finally catching up to his spine. I didn't think you'd recover from it, he admitted. But you did. I stared at him. That was never the point. He looked down at the desk, then back at me. I was afraid the building would collapse under your design. You mean under your version of my design? I shot back. You didn't even give it a chance. He rubbed a hand over his face. You were too ambitious, Helena, and you didn't trust me, I said. Not even enough to tell me the truth. Silence fell between us. Outside the window, the half-completed tower loomed above the city like a monument to betrayal. I didn't feel pride looking at it. Not yet. I underestimated you, he finally said. I didn't think you'd come back. I didn't think you'd fight. Well, I said, reaching for the flash drive. You were wrong. I turned to leave. Helena, he said softly, and for the first time in years, it didn't sound like an order, just a man with nothing left to defend. I looked back. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said. You weren't, I said, and that's not for you to decide anymore. He sat down slowly as if the truth itself had taken something from him. I stepped into the hallway, the flash drive still in my hand. I wasn't asking for his permission. Not anymore. The chamber room of the City Engineering Oversight Board smelled like linoleum and old coffee. Rows of city officials, commissioners, and auditors lined the front row behind a long, curved desk. Above them, a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the half-finished Grand Meridian Tower, silhouetted against the gray skyline. I stood in the center of the room, with the drive in one hand and my rolled-up schematics in the other. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. I was ready. Dr. Helena Voss, said the chairwoman, glancing at the agenda. You requested this hearing to present findings regarding the Meridian project? Yes, I said, stepping forward. I've submitted supporting documentation, internal system logs, simulation data, and original blueprints. I'm here to clarify that the design currently under construction is based on unauthorized and unsafe alterations, ones made without proper structural review, and worse, using falsified documentation. A murmur rippled through the board. I plugged in the drive and pulled up the first exhibit, a side-by-side schematic comparison. My design on the left, the altered version on the right. Then came the simulations, the wind tunnel videos. The moment the current build failed, collapse at 80 miles per hour. Then my restored model, standing firm. I walked them through every change, every cost-cutting measure disguised as optimization. I ended with the logs. This is an authorization sequence from 3 years ago, I said. It appears to be mine, but I was locked out of the system at that time. Another slide, the IT reactivation log, a forged reinstatement of my credentials, for 10 minutes, just long enough to backdate design approvals. Who authorized the reactivation? Asked one commissioner. I clicked again. The signature filled the screen. Marcus Voss, gasps, then silence. Evelyn Stroud, seated off to the side, stood and addressed the board. As city commissioner, I independently reviewed the simulation test Dr. Voss conducted. I witnessed the results myself. I support her findings. Furthermore, I confirm that the current version of the structure does not meet the original safety intent. The chairwoman leaned forward. And your recommendation? Restore her original design, Evelyn said, immediately. The board went into closed session, 10 minutes, 15. When they returned, the chairwoman's voice was calm but resolute. The City Engineering Oversight Board formally acknowledges that the approved structure under construction is materially compromised. We are ordering a full reversion to the original design created by Dr. Helena Voss. I exhaled. The chairwoman continued. All future modifications to the project must be approved under Dr. Voss's supervision. Her record will reflect full professional reinstatement and sole design credit. I nodded. Thank you. As the room emptied, I caught Grant Mallory standing near the back, shoulders slumped. He didn't say a word. He just nodded once, a stiff, reluctant gesture, then left. I didn't smile. This wasn't about applause. It was about truth, and the truth had finally been heard. 3 weeks later, the sound of hammers and scaffolding lifts echoed faintly through the open windows of my workshop. Grand Meridian Tower was back on track, my track, and I no longer needed a badge to walk on site. But I wasn't there. I was here. The light in my studio was soft, warm, filtered through wide industrial windows and paint-speckled blinds. Drafting tables lined the walls, covered in sketches, material samples, coffee mugs, and the pencil shavings of the next generation. "Helena," said one of my students, Maya, 19, sharp as steel. "Can you look at my suspension rig?" I walked over, leaned over her sketch, and smiled. "You braced the wrong node. You'll get wind shear right here," I said, tapping the spot gently. Maya groaned. "I keep doing that." "You'll stop," I said. "Eventually." Around us, the other young architects, some recent grads, some still trying to find their footing, worked in quiet concentration. Most of them were women. A few were men. All of them had been dismissed, overlooked, or told they were too ambitious, too soft-spoken, too much of something, and not enough of something else. They reminded me of myself. The door creaked open. I turned, expecting another student. Instead, it was Marcus. He didn't wear his usual blazer, just a worn gray shirt and a wool coat that looked older than I remembered. No clipboard, no voice full of orders. He didn't say anything at first. "I was nearby," he said finally. I waited. "I wanted to give you something," he added, reaching into his coat pocket. He held out a small object. I recognized it instantly. A brass drafting compass with a chip on one arm. The one he used to let me play with when I was a kid, when I sat at the edge of his desk pretending to build bridges out of pencils. "I kept this," he said, "but it doesn't belong to me anymore." I took it, slowly, then nodded once. "Thank you," I said. He looked around the studio, quiet, then back to me. "I never hated you," he said, his voice raw. I just couldn't see past my own name. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I looked down at the compass in my palm. It was heavier than I remembered. "I'm not building for you anymore," I said. He nodded. "I know." Behind me, Maya called out, "Helena, do you still want that bracing crossbeam horizontal or vertical?" I turned toward her, and without thinking, I held up the compass. "Use this." She blinked. "Is it special?" I looked at Marcus, then back at her. "It will be. Just use it better than we did." As he quietly left, the studio hummed back to life. Pencils scratching, rulers sliding, minds building. And for the first time in years, I felt it. Peace. Not from winning, but from teaching someone else how to build something no one could tear down. It arrived on a Tuesday, a thick, cream-colored envelope with a gold city seal pressed into the flap. No fanfare, no courier, just quietly delivered to my studio's mail slot between an architecture supply invoice and a flyer for discounted steel tubing. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on my desk for an hour, maybe two, while my students sketched floor plans and traded ideas over coffee mugs and pastry crumbs. Maya asked about cantilever load ranges. Thomas argued with Elise about stairwell code clearances. The studio buzzed with the kind of purpose I used to chase alone. When I finally opened the envelope, I didn't smile. Inside was a certificate from the City Architecture Council. Formal recognition. Lead architect of record, Grand Meridian Tower. There were embossed signatures, stamped dates, even a personalized note from the council chair thanking me for my enduring commitment to public safety, innovation, and integrity. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it just felt quiet. I held it in both hands for a long moment, then walked over to the back cabinet where I kept a locked drawer of personal files and old plans. I opened it, gently placed the certificate inside, and next to it, the folded sketch paper from 8 years ago. My first hand-drawn concept of the Meridian Tower, done in pencil, smudged with coffee, corners torn from being stuffed in a bag too many times. That's what started it. Not a committee, not a contract. Just an idea I couldn't shake. "Are you going to frame it?" Maya asked, peering over curiously. I shook my head. "No," she frowned. "Why not? You fought for that." "I didn't build it for recognition," I said. "I built it because it was right." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded and returned to her workstation. Outside the windows, sunlight spilled across the skyline, and at the center of it, rising floor by floor again, stood the Grand Meridian. Not my tower, not really, but the tower my design had called for, the one that would stand. I turned back to my students. Most of them were quiet, heads bent, focused. A few glanced my way now and then, But they didn't say much. They didn't need to. They were listening. Buildings don't stand because of names, I said, more to myself than anyone else. They stand because someone listened to what they needed. Maya looked up. Is that how you knew where the failure would be? You just listened to it? I nodded. Exactly. We worked until dusk. There was no champagne, no speech, no ceremony, just the sound of pencils moving across paper and a soft breeze through the open window. And for the first time in a long time, the stillness around me didn't feel like defeat. It felt like strength. And I kept building, not with steel or glass, but with the kind of truth that outlives your voice. That was enough.